Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's CPC meeting. Today is September 20th, 2023, and I am Reverend Patricia Hunter, one of the co-chairs of the Community Police Commission. The Seattle Community Police Commission acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Muckleshoot, Suquamish, Duwamish people, past and present. It's with humility that we recognize how much we benefit from living on their land and water. The Seattle Community Police Commission honors these tribes and we hold them in the highest regard. And we hope that this acknowledgement will encourage authentic relationships with urban Native people and all Coast Salish tribes. And at this time, I will take attendance. Commissioner Lars Erickson.
Good morning, here.
Good morning. Commissioner Patricia Hunter is present. Commissioner Adrian Levitt.
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Suzette Dickerson. And Commissioner Lynn Wilson will not be here today. She has an excused absence. Commissioner Raven Nicole Tyler.
Good morning. I'll be on camera shortly. I'm traveling right now, but I'm here.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Commissioner Mary Ruffin. Commissioner the Reverend Harriet Walden.
I'm here.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Commissioner Joel Merkel.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning. And Commissioner Lajaya Washington.
Good morning, I'm present.
Good morning. Commissioner Officer Mark Mullins.
Commissioner Mark Mullins is here.
Good morning. And Commissioner Lieutenant Tony Gadke.
Good morning, here.
Good morning. Commissioner Jeremy Wood. Commissioner Tasha Johnson.
Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning. And Commissioner Erica Newman. Okay, we do have a forum, and so we will continue with our meeting. May I have a motion to approve the draft agenda?
A motion to approve the draft agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the draft agenda as distributed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried and the agenda is approved. Next, we will move into our minutes, approving the minutes. They were distributed and I have a correction. Under the co-chair updates, it reads that one of the co-chairs mentioned that there was a hearing scheduled for 11 a.m. this morning in the judge's courtroom. I would like to make that specific. That is the federal judge James L. Robart's court. I believe that he deserves to be named. So, any other corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
I motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
Thank you. The second,
I
Second.
second that.
thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Abstentions? Then the motion is carried and the minutes of our last meeting are approved. At this point, we'll move into our update for this meeting. And for the co-chair update, 2 weeks ago, the co-chairs, and I believe there were two other commissioners as well, attended the ruling by Judge Robart on the consent decree. And we will have a follow-up on that ruling later in our meeting today. And our attorney, Dan Shee, will be giving that presentation. This past week has been over the top busy for the co-chairs with media requests to share our reaction to the body-worn video that was released to the public of Officer Otterer, who is the Vice President of the Seattle Police Officers Guild. The comments regarding the pedestrian death of a 23-year-old student in January who was killed by a speeding police officer. And today we will spend some time addressing this issue as a commission. The co-chairs drafted a statement and sent our response to local media. And it is posted on our webpage if you have not read it. The story of Officer Otterer's comments and the outrage over those comments was picked up by local media as well as national and international media. And the co-chairs were interviewed by several local print and television media, and the nationally, CNN, Associated Press, Washington Post, USA Today, the New York Times, and others. I lost count on how many interviews we had last week. And I want to publicly thank Dr. Ellis for her fielding and coordination of all the media requests. So thank you so much for that. So we've had little time to focus on much else since the release of that video. And for many of us, the crass comments of Officer Otterer are disturbing and add to our concern about the bias culture within the Seattle Police Department. So we look forward to the findings of the Office of Police Accountability, and we will say more about that in a few minutes. So at this time, we will turn to our Executive Director, Dr. Polly Ellis, for her updates.
Thank you so much. Yes, as Reverend Hunter said, it was a very, very busy week last week. Please look at the front page of our website, which shows the huge amount of media engagements that our CPC co-chairs did. On a sort of smaller note, as some of you know, that we are currently in the process of hiring for the senior policy analyst role. We've now finished the first round of interviews and we'll be moving on to the second round shortly. So we're very much looking forward to getting that policy role that's critical to the functioning of the CPC field. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Next on our agenda is updates from our community engagement team.
Yes, I'll be doing it. Community engagement has, this past week or two, outside of the annual report event at Winston Hughes on the 31st, our team has been out in the field, attending events and meetings, and if you have anything to add, please do, from some of the events you participated in. Our donation was out all last week at a conference in Philadelphia, and then I have been on vacation for the past 2 weeks, so this is my first week out. So we don't have a lot to report, but I would like to report that if you have any questions or want to know some of the things that the community engagement team are doing, please, a lot of the things are still on the website under community engagement, which was weekly, caught up weekly with our activities out in the community. We are planning to do a team retreat so that we can start our planning for the 12 months for coming 2024, so that we're not just showing up at different events, but doing planning for our team and for CPC. And so that we'll be having that retreat in October for more planning. So if there are things that you want us to participate in or be involved in, please let us know. But I would also like to task the commissioners to also pay attention. Joe Nathan has been very diligent in sending out calendar requests or things and events that are happening throughout the city, in all parts of the city. And so, if you are not getting those calendar requests, please let us know. But if you are getting those calendar requests, I ask commissioners to please pay attention, and if at all possible, if you can and will attend, um, that would be helpful to the CPC in the representation. And, but we also need to know, we're gonna start reporting out weekly to the co-chairs and the ED. And so we would like to know as well if, any of the commissioners have participated in any events. Yeah. With that,
Yeah, we have an engaged more CPC advisory council, LGBTQ advisory council, and we also engage different community events.
Thank you so much. We will move forward to the commissioners' work group updates. Is there an update from complaints and appeals?
Good morning. Yeah, I can provide here, let me, a brief update, which is that the Complaint and Appeals Work Group has been meeting with Dr. Rosenthal, who's an expert in complaint and appeals and also a part of the Federal Monitor team. And next week, we are awaiting his update. He's putting together research on similar sized jurisdiction complaint and appeals processes. And he let us know that next week we will hear an update. He has interviewed people from similar sized jurisdictions, so from Boston, Charlotte, and Portland, Oregon. And we should be hearing the update from him about how those similar kind of oriented and sized jurisdictions run their complaint and appeals process. And that will be a pretty big update from him. And I'm happy to report back more about that after.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Levitt. The police practices work group, is there an update from Commissioners Tyler or Washington?
I can go ahead and say something. We don't have too much of an update right now. We're looking to change the days that we meet to kind of accommodate for more schedules. But we don't have too much update at this moment.
Okay. Thank you. Behavioral health work group. Commissioner Newman was here?
He joined, yeah.
Commissioner Newman, do you have an update for that work group?
Hear me?
Commissioner Newman, do you have an update on the behavioral health work group and what you're doing?
The behavioral health group has not met and we are in touch with Callie to get some administrative support to continue leading our group. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't believe we have any new business at this time. And so we are ahead of schedule, about 15 minutes, but we will just keep moving forward. And I'm going to turn this part of our meeting over to Commissioner Merkel as we move into the discussion of the SPOG leadership, body-worn video, and pedestrian death.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunter, and good morning, everyone. I think, as everyone has seen by now, the Seattle Police Department released a body-worn video that recorded one half of a phone conversation between Seattle Police Detective Daniel Arterer and SPOG President Mike Solon last week. The co-chairs, and I'm sure all of the commissioners, have heard an overwhelming response from the community about that video and their reaction to it. And today we are going to dive into that discussion. We're going to share our individual reactions and thoughts about it. There's just a couple things I wanted to note up front as we do that. First, I just want to highlight a specific section of the ordinance that relates to the Police Commission's authority and responsibility. And that is under section 3.29.360 subsection H. of the Seattle Police Accountability Ordinance. I'm just going to read from it and note that the co-chairs have consulted with our city attorneys about this provision and what it means. And I urge everyone to keep this in mind as we have this conversation today. And it basically says that the CPC has the authority to review closed OPA investigations and identify opportunities for systemic improvements in accordance with this ordinance. However, the CPC shall not serve as a review board for individual investigations and shall not evaluate or opine on the sufficiency of the evidence, findings, or determinations of any specific OPA investigation, shall not seek to influence the course or outcome of any specific OPA investigation or the findings, discipline, or other remedial action recommended or imposed in such cases. What does that mean? My interpretation and in consultation with the attorneys is basically we can't opine as a commission on the sufficiency of the OPA complaint involving Detective Arter. We cannot attempt to influence the OPA investigation or any potential recommended sanction if there is one. So that said, the core mission of the CPC is to make policy recommendations and to speak for the community as we are receiving their input. And there's a lot to say on those fronts. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we bear in mind that limitation on the CPC in this discussion. With that said, I have a number of thoughts that I'd like to share as a co-chair to kind of frame the discussion, but by no means do I want to limit the discussion to my observations. I encourage every commissioner to share their thoughts and reactions. There's a number of things that the video brought to mind for me, and I was asked about this a number of times over the last week. The first was just how the comment reflected on attitudes towards the person, the pedestrian, the student who was killed. I was struck by the attitude towards certain members of the community. I was struck by how the incident report showed the vehicle was traveling at a max speed of approximately 74 miles an hour and struck the pedestrian at an estimated 63 miles an hour. However, on the video, you can hear the detective estimate that the vehicle speed was around 50 miles an hour. You also heard the detective doubt that the pedestrian was thrown more than 40 feet. The incident report, it indicates that she was thrown much farther than that. So I was struck by the quality of the observations related to the investigation. I was struck by how it impacted or the views on police accountability generally, investigating alleged instances of misconduct, investigating incidents at all. And I'm also struck by the potential conflict of interest of having a member of the SPOG leadership participate in an investigation involving potential alleged misconduct of a member of SPOG. I'm struck by some of the limitations in the existing SPOG contract. All of these things are issues that the CPC has been working on for years, particularly back in 2018 when the last contract was negotiated. The Seattle Police Commission wrote to the City Council objecting to that contract, wrote to the judge overseeing the consent decree objecting to that contract. And so I do emphasize that that is another important issue that the Commission should be looking at right now. All that said, the co-chairs have met and discussed this extensively this week. We do have a recommendation to the Commission on an action we could take today. Essentially, we believe the Commission has the authority to recommend to the Seattle Police Chief to put Detective Arter on indefinite unpaid leave. And we will be asking the Commission to vote on authorizing the co-chairs to send a letter to the Chief to that effect later during this discussion. We'll also be asking to ask the Chief to engage in a community work group related to Seattle police culture that involves members of the community, the Seattle Police Accountability Partners, as well as representatives from the Seattle Police Department. That said, I do want to get into the discussion. I don't want the discussion to be limited by any of my comments, so feel free to speak your mind, bearing in mind the limitation in the ordinance on the commission that I mentioned earlier. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor to commissioners to share their thoughts and reactions on this topic.
I'm happy. This is Adrian Levitt. I'm happy to share a couple thoughts on this. And the first, I guess, I just want to commend Kali and the co-chairs for the swift statements and action. I know that when these things happen, one has to act fast. And I was just really impressed by the statements and all of the press. And I know it's a lot of work and it's very, very important. So I just want to thank you all for that. And just say my sort of brief reaction, which is that the video is just horrible and awful and shows a continued culture of the Seattle Police Department discounting the lives of people who were killed by Seattle police officers, sort of no matter the context. And we, as a community, deserve to have dignity and respect to everyone, no matter what has happened, regardless of the facts and circumstances, regardless of the investigation. And obviously there's considerable concerns about this investigation, but overwhelmingly it just shows a continued disrespect to people who have died by the police. And it feels to me totally related to the mocking of Tamarius Butt's death, which I think everyone knows I've been very involved with that family. And this feels like a continuation of that culture. And it makes me wonder what happens when we aren't allowed to hear snippets of these conversations and what really has happened. So it is so disturbing. It's sort of sometimes hard to articulate and wrap one's mind around. I'm glad that the CPC can take some action in terms of its a response to the chief and recommendation. And those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levitt.
This is Commissioner Erickson. I'll share Commissioner Levitt's acknowledgement of the work of the commission and the co-chairs on responding, and thank you. And I will absolutely be supporting the letter. I think it's important that we back the community members in this moment. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Tyler. I just want to say, I mean, it's kind of what Commissioner Levitt was saying. It's really hard to wrap your mind around it and even articulate how I feel. I think, everyone saw the video and heard it and was just outraged. And I was outraged over and over again. The more and more I scrolled on social media. And it just speaks volumes to kind of what we've always been saying about the sentiment towards police, and that it didn't just happen out of nowhere. And this is obviously something that was just an embodiment of like how folks everywhere feel about police and how police have been feeling about the community. I will 100% be signing on to that letter, and I'm still at a loss for words. I'm still trying to process all my feelings. So I'm not saying too much because I'm trying to also make sure I'm not saying anything too crass right now, because the thoughts that are coming across my brain are it's just out of control. And I'm just so disappointed. I can't even say I'm disappointed or shocked. I'm just disgusted by it overall. And I'm very proud of your responses to it. I think that you were spot on, and I second Commissioner Levitt, his accolades towards you all. But overall, I'm just like still at a loss for words because I've been a victim of police brutality in other ways in other areas, and this just kind of brings up just other traumatic experiences, and it just echoes and embodies what community members have been saying, and it just shows that we have so much work to do, and we need to make sure we're holding people's feet to the fire and we're getting it done.
I see Commissioner Dickerson, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I too echo a lot of the sentiments that were already stated, and you know, really looking at that video and listening to the content of it, you know, it kind of puts you in a state of disbelief that people who are sworn to protect the community are then saying horrible things as they did. You know, it just showed a great devaluing of life instead of the valuing of life. And so I too would be in support of the co-chairs.
I will say that I actually look forward to the report from OPA, also Police Accountability, because I want to know what context makes those comments okay. What we've seen and heard from SPD is that we don't have the context, and that when we hear the context, then the words from Detective Carter will not sound so bad. So I'm looking forward to that report, because I want to know what context makes those words okay. And I am very supportive of sending this letter.
Commissioner Walden, you're saying you have some comments.
Yeah, I echo everything that everyone else has said, but more, also this detective, this officer has cost the city apparently almost $2 million since 2014. So when you look at that piece, it's wondering, you know, at what point, what is the cost value of an officer who continues to cost the city money of misconduct, so in the past. So anyway, I think that's something to be looked at and considered also about this detective, you know. And also he's the leadership. I mean, I think, wow. So if this is the leadership of SPOG, I'm vice president, and actually was supposed to be talking to the president. Wow, well then that does let you know that that there's some real issues there around the leadership of SPOG, and I think that that's we should duly note that piece.
Thank you, Commissioner Walden. While others are gathering their thoughts and thinking about what they want to share, I do want to encourage folks to share what they're hearing from their communities. I know everyone has spoken or heard from their communities about this video and their communities and their personal reactions to it. I think that's an important thing to talk about. I also, you know, want to echo what Reverend Walden said, what Reverend Hunter said, in that, yeah, we on the video, we don't hear SPOG President Mike Solin's comments on the other end of the line, but we do hear Detective Potter's reactions to the other end of the line. And that is also part of what is so disturbing to so many people in the community, and what we've heard loud and clear from in this last week, and that there's just no context in which any of these comments are acceptable. And, you know, the community deserves a department that reflects its values, and this could not be farther from that. I see Commissioner Tyler's hand is up. Yes, Commissioner Tyler.
And sorry again, I'm not on camera. I'm still trying to get my computer to work. But I think something else that kind of came to mind as well is they he seemed very comfortable having this conversation, and so that leads me to believe that this isn't the first time that these conversations have taken place. And I too am curious to see what is the context, because if anyone believes that the context changes what was said, I want to see it as well. But I'm also curious as how many other of these conversations were had, because if you can feel that comfortable speaking about the value of someone's life and laughing and giggling, that means that you've done it before. And if you've already cost the city millions of dollars, we need to really be looking at that too. So I'm also curious about other footage that may be around that shows him and Solon having these kind of conversations following incidents like this.
Thank you, Commissioner Tyler. Commissioner Washington.
Hi, I echo what's been said. I agree with what's been said. And I have concerns, like, because as far as what I know, Officer Otter was the one who responded to the scene and evaluated the officer that killed this young woman, and then made these comments that same night. And so it's concerning when you have someone who doesn't really take serious, or maybe doesn't care about this woman losing her life, being the same person to investigate or make contact with the officer that killed her. And as the vice president and the president of the Officers Guild, they represent all of the officers. So this is just really bad, because this is what we're left with. This is what the community is left with as a representation of Seattle, of the Seattle Police Department. I don't think it matters what the context is, because someone losing their life that same night is never going to be funny. And a lawyer, if they say that a lawyer might say, oh, she had limited value, that's not funny either. My question is, wouldn't that be their lawyer? Wouldn't that be a lawyer representing the officer? So it's this culture of maybe protecting one another and of not really valuing human life seems to go further than just the president and the vice president, who is this lawyer that they're speaking of as well. And it's concerning that I think that maybe that this footage and this, audio has been had for a while, or maybe like a month or so, right? It's not just the day they released it was the day it was found out about. So that's concerning about the transparency regarding the timing of when this information was found out. And also, what I'm hearing is that people are really upset that there seems to be more attention now to this young woman's death because of this audio than there was when she actually died or was killed. And it just seems like if there's no camera, if there's no audio, if there's no video, we don't really take seriously what's going on. We always have to have proof. But a lot of people have been saying this is their experience with our police department and our systems of accountability. So I just wish and hope that we can still follow through on what initially happened, which was this woman being killed, and follow through and see like what is going to happen with the officer that killed her. And also be very, very thorough in making sure that there's action taken with the president and the vice president of the Officers Guild. And I hope we don't take too much time and kind of let this blow over, take another year to do something.
Thank you, Commissioner Washington. I think it's also somewhat Commissioner Washington mentioned is worth kind of emphasizing with respect to how we discovered this through body worn video and how it impacts police accountability systems. And we're going to have a presentation after this discussion from the CPC's outside counsel on the consent decree about what the judge said at the court hearing 2 weeks ago. But I think it's worth bringing up right now one of the points that he made, which was years ago when the issue of body worn video and dash cam video came up. There was resistance among the police department, particularly police guild, to instituting those videos. And the judge ordered it. And the judge talked about that extensively on the bench to his ruling. And I think it's worth emphasizing what Commissioner Washington just said, that had we not had those tools in place, which were largely put in place entirely put in place because of the consent decree litigation, this is not something that would have come to light. In the context of police accountability systems, I think it's also important to acknowledge there is an OPA investigation proceeding. And that OPA investigation is proceeding according to not only the police accountability ordinance, but also the existing contract with Police Officers Guild. And when we talk about, the commission talks about our position on those accountability provisions and how those accountability processes are to be followed. That's why what the police commission advocates for on the contract is so important, because it impacts investigations such as this. So I just want to highlight that. And then the last thing I want to point out is Commissioner Walden reminded me, as far as we know, the information provided by the Seattle Police Department is that this video was discovered in the routine course of business by an SPD employee, not Detective Arter, and that employee reported it up the chain, and that's how it made it to OPA, and that's how an OPA investigation was initiated. That's the information that I understand was put out publicly by the police department. I want to keep hearing from folks on their thoughts on the topic and the reactions of what they're hearing from their communities. Yes, Commissioner Johnson, thank you.
Good morning. It's I am still hesitant. I don't really know what to say. I'm overwhelmed by this video and the feedback from my team. I'll throw the interim in there. Shout out to Kelly for making it to, to Edie. But I am the interim executive director of Choose 180. And we have been working with just different police departments to plan a process of building like a co-responder model or some sort of a policing alternative. And I have been working so hard with my team because I work with a team of folks that have been impacted by police violence. They themselves, family members, friends, like this is the population that I work with. This is the population that we work with outside of the organization because we hire folks with lived experience. So I feel like I'm swimming upstream when I had those conversations anyway about creating co-responder models or working with the police to develop these models so that we can have some sort of an influence on how they're being developed. And when videos like this come out, and when this video came out, there's that confirmation bias that, oh, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's why we can't do this. And it's not, oh, that's one person. It's not. I refuse to believe that it is an entire department of people. I do know that we've seen it enough to know that there is an issue that's larger than a single person. Um, but I refuse to believe that it's all. So I will still continue to work with my team to develop um, some sort of a rapport, which is what we're trying to do now. I'm abandoning the work with at this time, and we're moving into building relationship and having some different people come in, officers come in, talk to staff. Just we take visits to them to out to the community and visit with the police officers. Just trying a different strategy. Um, it's also just disheartening when I'm thinking about our work groups and the work that we're doing here in the CPC. And the conversations that we're having, the discourse that's being had about like different trainings that might help, different things we can do to influence the police officers mindsets, or at least work with changing in the mindsets on how community is viewed by some folks. And when I hear videos or hear things like this, it's like, just what happened to the human element? Like I understand that there's some trainings that can be had. You can learn how to talk to different communities of people, work with different cultures and understand the nuances of those types of things, but just in general, just the human element of human life. What happened to caring about your neighbor? I mean, I guess that's the problem, is that we are no longer neighbors. I I'm sorry, y'all. Um, I just want to applaud y'all for being able to articulate coherently with words responses, because apparently I cannot, and I'm still distraught. Um, but I wanted to take a moment to say that at least. And Yeah, I'm just going to stop there. I'm going to let other folks talk, but I did want to let you know what my community and what I'm hearing back from my folks is that it feels like we took one step forward and two steps back. And so now here we are and swimming upstream again.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. And Commissioner Levitt, I see your hand is up again. If I could just take a moment to acknowledge some of the comments Commissioner Johnson shared. I do think you were very articulate, so thank you. And to your point about refusing to believe that everyone, all of the officers at SPD share these views and perspectives, I want to echo that. I have heard from officers who are very upset and hurt by what was recorded in that video. There are a number of officers who are on the front lines in the community, on patrol, interacting with the community every day. And this has made their job a lot more difficult because it's another incident that causes the community to lose faith, trust, and confidence in the police department. And that makes working in the community that much more difficult for a lot of officers. So I do want to acknowledge your point that it's not all officers, but I also want to acknowledge that there appears to be an environment that makes it difficult for officers that object to this and are offended by this to do much about it. I think it's also important to acknowledge that culture and that environment, how difficult it is for many officers who have opposing views to do much about it, or at least that's how they feel. So with that, I do want to call on Commissioner Levitt.
Thank you. I guess my comment is about sort of how we discover these issues. And I appreciate Commissioner Merkel, you sharing, which I didn't know, about how this particular video came to light. about the comments about Miss Kandula's death. And it causes me, it just makes me wonder, and I don't have an answer, I guess I have a question or a wonder, which is what is the internal mechanism is there an internal mechanism that SPD would ever release this on their own? I understand now that regarding the comments that Detective Otter made about Miss Kandula, that came through a brave employee, and I know that for Mr. Butts, that came through outside counsel who is working on a totally unrelated issue, that these videos came out. And I have spent in my career, I would hate to calculate the number of hours watching body worn video. It has to be hundreds and hundreds of hours watching. And I can say that I have seen officers be respectful and decent and what we would hope towards community members in their interactions. And I've seen the opposite. And so, but it just makes me wonder, what else are we not seeing? How can this come to light? Would SPD bring this to light? Did they know about this happening? What was happening on the other side of the phone? And I agree with the comments that no context makes this okay, but I am also eager to hear. So those are, I guess, the things that I'm wondering about as I listen to this conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner Levitt. Commissioner Washington, I see your hand is still up. Is that just from your prior comment?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Sorry.
no worries.
I have one more comment about what I have heard from my community. And one is that an individual said, well, I'm sure you're sorry now that you signed up to be a commissioner of Dale Community Police Commission. And I have to say, no, I'm not sorry that I volunteered to do this work. It just shows that there is so much work to do, and it just makes me even more determined to do what I can so that policies are in place so that individuals from my community can rest assured that the policing that they will encounter will be just and constitutional. And so I am even more committed to continue with the work that I'm doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunter. I want to add, I mean, I want folks to feel comfortable sharing. I know there's a lot to react to, and probably folks are still processing everything that they saw and heard. But one of the reasons we are asking, or we are recommending, the co-chairs are recommending that the commission approve asking the chief of police to engage in a work group with accountability partners in the community on police culture, is because, you know, as you recall, a few meetings ago, we had the chief discussing with us that mock tombstone in his precinct. And, you know, the police commission, when it was first instituted in 2012, police culture and policing practices was one of the central themes of the work of the commission, which ultimately led to the landmark 2017 Police Accountability Ordinance. And we are still trying to realize the promise of that ordinance in a police contract and police accountability in Seattle. Anyway, I say that because that is one of the reasons that we are asking, recommending to ask for a work group that involves the community on these issues. But I do want other folks to, if they have comments or thoughts, to share them. We've scheduled up to an hour for this conversation. We have plenty more time if we want to take it. Are there any additional comments or thoughts? I don't want to cut it off. We have plenty of time if folks have more to share.
I just want to add, this is Adrian Levig, and I'm sorry to continue to
Please.
But in here, but I just want to add to your last comment, Joel, that what's disappointing, and that's not even the right word, but I'll just say that word with emphasis. What's disappointing to me about the reaction, the relationship between the reaction to the mock tombstone of Mr. Butson and the comments about Ms. Kandula is, I think we were told that what happened with the mock tombstone was before, and now we are here now, and that many years had passed, a couple years since that tombstone, and when we got to see the video, and much of the discourse I heard from the Seattle police was that this has changed. This is no more. We would never do this now. We would not tolerate it now. And I think that what this has made clear about the Detective Auditor's comments about Ms. Kandula is, in fact, this is still happening now, and that hasn't changed, and that's very distressing and disturbing to me, and it makes me even more emphatic that the CPC should send a letter with such recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levitt.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak to the culture. I mean, because the culture of what we're looking at and seeing here is the same culture in America, and that culture hasn't been changed at all. I mean, we continue to work on this issue, but I think fundamentally we have to continue to look at this, but also consider the hatred that really is prevalent in America against other groups of people. And I think we have to, for me and the people that I talk to, I said we have to move beyond bias, because bias is just a nice word for racism. It's a nice way to say that we have racism in our community or in America. I mean, the fabric of America is intertwined. We're not liking the other. We are recipient of that dislike ever since we were stolen and brought here, and so other people I actually get the same treatment. So I think we have to move beyond the nice words bias, because it is a nice word that want to cover up the feelings of other people against non-white people. I don't use the word people of color, but non-white people. We have to talk about it. We have to be real about it. It's real in America. It's palatable. You see it every day on the news about what happens to the other people in America. So I think it's time to have a real conversation about hatred, what it looks like, what it feels like, and how it continues in every area of America, including police, because it's entrenched in that. And it's entrenched there that people will feel so comfortable with that and feel so comfortable with the tombstone. It's a level of comfortability that hatred has allowed people to hide behind nice words like bias. So I think we need to go further than that.
Thank you, Commissioner Walden. Commissioner Erickson, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, this is maybe it's a question for our council, and if they were planning on going through this, or maybe Co-Chair Merkel, you may have some insight into this, but I had seen media reports that the Guild claimed that they, the officers self-reported this recording. So hearing today that it was found the way that you described it, that is quite alarming to me, that there's this discrepancy, and I'm curious as to why SPD or OPA or the mayor's office would not be clarify that. I think it speaks to it potentially speaks to the character of what's happening here too, obviously. And is that something that anyone would be able to respond to? Or we're speaking about this in an open forum now, obviously, but I'm just curious about that.
I will say that when I viewed the video that was posted by the Seattle Police Department, first, let me back up. Last Monday, the video was, I believe, first posted by a local news reporter. I believe it was Erica Barnett on Publicola. I believe within an hour of that being posted, I believe she got it from public records request. And within an hour or so of it being posted on that media website, my understanding is the Seattle Police Department then posted the video on their website with an explanation that it had been reported up the chain by another employee and ultimately reported to OPA there. That is my understanding of the information that the police department put out when they posted the video. So that's where I got that. I mentioned that we're going to have a presentation from our outside counsel about the judge's comments and ruling. But I do want to make a connection of that to this, in that, the judge has said multiple times, in hearings this year, in the May 31 hearing, when the city and DOJ were making their motion, where he asked questions and made comments, and in the hearing on September 6th, where he issued his ruling in response to their motion on the consent decree, that he has an expectation that the next contract with SPOG, at a minimum, as a floor, include the Seattle Police Accountability Ordinance, or at least the accountability provisions consistent with those. That's the floor. And right now, the contract does not do that. And those accountability provisions, as the judge said, are a cornerstone of constitutional policing. So, as we all know, the city and SPOG are currently collectively bargaining for the next contract. And that's why I think what the judge said about the accountability ordinance and accountability provisions system, which are still actively part of the consent decree. The consent decree was largely lifted, but not on the accountability. And that's an important point that I think we need to remember going forward.
It's not SPOG yet, it's being made, that they're going to SPOG didn't come to that.
They're still negotiating with SPOG right now, actively. So again, we still have plenty of time. Are there any other comments or folks that want to share their thoughts on this topic?
I'll just say one thing about the contract, because in 2018, when we asked the city council to reject the contract, of course they did not do that. They had a 5-4 anyway. But also since they signed that contract, some of the provisions that was not agreed on, it reverted back to 2005. And I think that's what people have to understand, that some of what we're dealing with today is under contract that goes back to 2005, because they did not get agreement on some of the things that in the 2017 and the 2018 when they signed the agreement. So that's why it's really important for, I think, the community to absolutely come to understand it, that is the major impediment here is the contract. We thought it was something else a long time ago, but now we understand the contract even more so. So I advise the community to go look it up and look at the contract and see exactly what the city gave up and see what has happened. And I would go all the way back to 2005 so you can get a real good understanding of what's happening in Seattle. And that would make some of the leadership be comfortable in making those kinds of statements, because we're back in 2005 and the community don't know that. Although the contract was signed in 2018, with some of those provisions with the appendix, reverts back to 2005, and you might be able to explain that a little bit more about what happens when it goes back to the appendix. When you said it the other day, when you don't get an agreement, what happens?
I think what you're referring to, if there is a lack of agreement on certain provisions, then provisions in the prior contract carry forward. I don't have that at my fingertips right now, but I think that's what you're referring to.
So that's right.
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unless there are any additional comments, I do invite folks, if they have something they think of and they want to share, please do interrupt me. But I'm also happy to entertain a motion and a discussion if necessary on authorizing the co-chairs to send a letter to Chief Diaz recommending that Detective Daniel Otter be placed on definite unpaid leave while the OPA investigation proceeds, and to engage in a community work group involving not only the community but the accountability partners, addressing SPD culture. So at this time, we'll go ahead and entertain such a motion and any discussion.
I so move.
Thank you. Was that Commissioner Levitt?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Tyler. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Commissioner Washington, I see your hand.
I'm not opposed. I just had a question.
Yes.
Sorry. My question was, I'm not really clear on what happened with Officer Dave's investigation. Since Officer Otter was the first one to make contact and kind of do that initial, I don't know if you want to call it investigation.
Commissioner Washington, there's a motion on the floor, so let's go ahead and address that, and I'm happy to answer your question to my best of my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, are there any abstentions?
Commissioner Getke abstains.
Thank you, Commissioner Gadget.
Officer Mullins abstained.
Thank you, Officer Mullins. Well, with that, the motion carries, and the co-chairs will send a letter today to Chief Diaz to this effect. To answer Commissioner Washington's question, I understand your question was about the investigation into Officer Dave and the collision itself. I could tell you what my understanding is. My understanding is that case was being investigated. I believe there's an OPA investigation, but also more significantly, my understanding is there was a collision investigation that was referred to the King County Prosecutor's Office for consideration of possible criminal charges on Officer Dave. The King County Prosecutor's Office is currently reviewing the case file to make a determination and a filing decision. That has not yet been done. That is my understanding of the status of that investigation. I know there are folks from SPD present, so if I got that wrong, they could probably correct me, but that's my understanding of the status of that.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if it was complete, and I was going to ask if we could ask to have another investigation, but it sounds like it's still ongoing. So thank you.
Correct. Are there any other commissioners that wish to speak or address the topic at all before we move into the next part of our agenda?
This is Officer Mullins. I'd like to say something.
Thank you. Yes.
Some of the hardest days that I've ever had being on the police department, which I love. I love my job. I've always loved my job. For 33 years, I've loved my job. But some of the hardest days to get up and put on a uniform are days when you have to go to a funeral of an officer, days when citizens are lose their lives senselessly, and days when the report of an officer in misconduct. So the day that this story broke and I had to go to work, I knew what was coming. I knew what was going to come. And if you understand what I do in terms of patrol, I work the mobile precinct, which I'm pretty much in place all day in one area. So I get a chance to talk to the community basically all day. And I have made some inroads into people trusting me and people talking to me and even people assisting me. which is also transferred over to other officers being able to talk and being and befriending people on the street. When something like this happens, it damages years and years of inroads and progress. And we have to start all over again. When I got on the street that day, there's a slight program that I do where I hand out lunches to people. You don't know how it feels when you've handed out lunches to people quite frequently, and they tell you they don't want your lunch, and you know that person's hungry. So I don't want to get caught up into my feelings and what happened to me. I know we have a citizen who has lost their lives, and an officer who has made a miscomment that he shouldn't have made. But I would implore officers to think before they speak, because the damage that is done is irreparable, and it hurts other officers. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Mullins. Are there any additional thoughts or questions or discussion on this topic before we move into our next agenda item? Again, we have plenty of time, and if there are additional thoughts that folks want to share, now is the time.
Joel, I just want to say, as a commissioner, I want to acknowledge what Officer Mullins said, because I know that that had to have been hard for him to do when you're speaking out against other counterparts. And so, you know, I want to make sure that we are giving him the space and grace that he deserves as well, because like others have said on this call, I too do not believe that it's all officers. And so, and what I wouldn't want to do is to bucket everybody into one category like is done so many times. And acknowledge that we do have good officers on the force, and that, but we do have to address the misgivings of those officers that choose to do stuff, whether consciously or unconsciously, that are detrimental to the community. But I do want to acknowledge, Officer Mullins' response.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. I wholeheartedly agree, and I didn't want to move past it without acknowledging it as well. I just wanted to give other folks space. But yes, Officer Mullins, thank you again for your comments and for.
Thank you.
Those were, I understand that those are difficult things to say in the circumstances you are in. So thank you for sharing that in this meeting. Okay, well, unless there are any additional thoughts or comments folks want to share, we can move forward with the next item on our agenda. And as we talked about at our last meeting, we cut that meeting short so that we could attend the federal court hearing where Judge Robart issued his ruling on the city and DOJ's motion on the consent decree. And our attorney at Sussman Godfrey, Dan Shee, is going to give a presentation on the context of the court hearing, what the judge ruled, and what it means. And this is our opportunity to get a better understanding of what that ruling means and what we can do moving forward. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Dan Shee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am going to attempt to share a presentation that we'll be walking through. I understand this has been made available online as well. Do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. So yeah, my name is Dan Shi. I am one of the attorneys with the law firm Sussman Godfrey, representing the CPC in the consent decree case. What I plan to do today is give a quick rundown of what happened at the court's recent hearing and the key points of the court's subsequent order. This is a public presentation, which means any discussion here is not covered by attorney-client privilege. So I am trying to stay away from opinion and legal opinions and advice for now, and would recommend that substantive questions of that nature be reserved for another time, especially about what the CPC should do going forward. But do feel free to ask me to clarify something that doesn't make sense. So I'll start with a little bit of background on the consent decree because I understand there may be newer commissioners who do not have the same context. So the consent decree arose from an investigation that the DOJ announced that it was commencing into allegations of excessive force and discriminatory policing by the SPD. So this was in early 2011. At the end of 2011, the DOJ issued a report finding that the SPD had engaged in a pattern and practice of using unnecessary or excessive force and noting serious concerns about discriminatory policing. The city and DOJ had discussions and they reached a settlement agreement to address the DOJ's concerns. And the DOJ then initiated this litigation, the United States versus City of Seattle, which we call the consent decree litigation, for purposes of court approval and oversight of the settlement, really to kind of lock it in. Shortly thereafter, the court granted approval of that settlement and stated that final approval would occur after the city had achieved full compliance with the requirements of the consent decree and maintained that for 2 years. The next timeline item here is 2023. Obviously, a lot happened between 2012 and 2023 that we're not showing on this slide. You may know some of the history. The city appeared to achieve compliance with the consent decree, and then incidents occurred that the court found brought the city out of compliance. There were the racial justice protests that really tested the SPD's processes, including some that had been revised in light of the consent decree, and that surfaced further issues. So there's been a lot of history there, but for the sake of getting through this, in 2023, early this year, the DOJ and city believed sustained compliance finally had been achieved and filed a motion seeking a court finding that there has been sustained compliance with most aspects of the consent decree and seeking to replace the consent decree with a more limited agreement focused on a couple remaining areas of work, which we'll get into. The court heard argument from the parties on that motion in May. Now, by September, the court was prepared to issue its order on the motion. However, the court decided to hold another hearing before doing that. This time, not to hear from the parties, but to provide oral comments about its forthcoming order. And those comments provide a glimpse into how the court may view and consider progress on those remaining areas. So what happened at the hearing? There have been summaries in the media. You can certainly see those for more detail. And we are getting the transcript of that hearing as well. But the short of it is the court started by providing background on the consent decree, some of the history and trials and tribulations of getting to where we are. He acknowledged that the Seattle Police Department had made very substantial progress in most areas. He repeatedly said that he was proud of the force's progress and credited many of the participants in that process, including this noting the CPC's meaningful contributions to it. He summarized his forthcoming order, and the next slide will get into the specifics of that. But most interestingly, he offered several additional thoughts. And one bullet here that Commissioner Merkel had noted, which I didn't include as a bullet actually, but as the commissioner noted, the judge commented on his requirement of use of body cams. It's just kind of relaying some of the history of that. Then he dived into a few other thoughts. One is that there are recruitment and retention challenges for police forces around the nation, and noting some of his sense of what has contributed to those challenges. But keeping in perspective that this was not a Seattle-specific problem. The judge lamented the lawless policing that was commonly shown in police procedural TV shows. He expressed displeasure at the police officers who may attempt to prejudice the accountability investigations in the court of public opinion. Essentially, he called out one instance where he perceived officers trying to get their story out first on an accountability incident. And then the judge made clear that he had concerns about the use of collective bargaining to undermine accountability reforms. So that was some of the color that the judge chose to provide at the hearing before issuing the order. Following that, he entered the order the next day. I'm going to start with, you'll see on the screen here, this is what the parties, the city and the DOJ, had proposed as their for the court to adopt. They asked that for a finding that the city has achieved and sustained compliance with the core requirements of the consent decree. Second, that the focus now shift to two remaining areas of work. One is the use of force in crowd settings or crowd control or crowd management. And the second was ensuring a sustainable system of accountability. Two areas that had surfaced as areas where more work needed to be done. And then finally, asking that this new compliance agreement supersede the consent decree. The court issued a mixed ruling. On the first 2 points, the court agreed. The court first found that the city had sustained full and effective compliance on most of the requirements of the consent decree on issues relating to crisis intervention, stops and detentions, bias-free policing, which he was careful to caveat was not the absolute elimination of bias in policing, but the achievement of certain milestone tasks under the consent decree. Supervision and development of the CPC and OPA. And so the court, finding that sustained compliance there, terminated those obligations under the consent decree. The court next adopted the parties' proposals for action and actually ordered some additional tasks on the remaining areas of work. And then, but on the final point, ruled that the consent decree remains in force and is not superseded by the compliance agreement. So let's dive into some of the things that the court has ordered going forward. The first, under use of force in crowd settings. I divided these up into three main areas. The first relates to crowd management policy. The court, as proposed by the parties, the court ordered that the city revise its policies in consultation with the DOJ and the monitor, and ensure that officers are trained on the new crowd management policy. In addition, the court ordered that this SPD had to report on all of this, on the status of all the recommended policy changes from the Sentinel event review process. Now that's for those who don't, may not be familiar, a Sentinel event essentially refers to a negative event, a bad outcome, something that we're not proud of in a substantial way. And there has been a review process addressing several of those, or a large number of those events, and recommended policy changes have come out of that process. So the SPD needs to report on the status of those changes and specifically explain if any are not being integrated into policy changes. In addition, the court ordered an alternative process to be developed for reporting and review of use of force to ensure that those things would occur in a timely way in any future, what he described as significant sustained protests. So the background there being the recognition that existing processes didn't work well enough in the sustained and significant protests that we saw, say, in 2020. And finally, the court ordered the SPD to report on, so there's been state legislation requiring independent investigations of police use of deadly force, and the court ordered the SPD to report on the status of the implementation of such things. Moving on to accountability, there are several slides on this because there are the tasks are quite varied. So the court ordered the monitor to retain a consultant to complete a sustainability assessment that is assessing whether the accountability system that has been created is how sustainable is it. And there are a series of deadlines for that reporting to be done. The court also ordered the SPD to develop what it called a data transparency, usability, and accessibility plan. And that addresses essentially data on the racial disparity. So the court called for improving the collection of data on race in stops, detentions, and use of force, a plan on incorporating that data into reports, and the plan should also include how public access would be provided. The court specifically noted that this could include other data that CPC and OIG identify as being critical to transparency. So this is a potential to-do item for the CPC that was specifically highlighted by the court. So the timeline for that is over the next few months. The department is to report by December, mid-December, on the status of these recommendations. Another item that the court noted, and this was not requested by the parties, the prior tasks are kind of a mix of things that the parties proposed and some that the court itself came up with. Another one of those is that the court ordered that within 30 days of any tentative collective bargaining agreement with the police, the city would file an analysis of the effect of that agreement on accountability and review systems. So as noted earlier, the court had voiced concerns about discipline and accountability being topics of collective bargaining. I don't want to characterize, but I will note that the court's statements in that regard were characterized to the Seattle Times as a shot across the bow. Another set of tasks that the court ordered related to ongoing assessment of compliance with the consent decree. The city is required to file updated outcome measures on, even though there has been sustained compliance in these areas, according to the court, the city still needs to update its measures of how it's doing on use of force, crisis intervention, stops and detentions, bias-free policing, and supervision. The OIG is to develop a work plan for its ongoing assessment of those areas and to file that as well. The OIG is to conduct use of force assessment in various contexts, crisis incidents, crowd management, and also related to the use of what they call less lethal devices. There are deadlines for that assessment to be prepared. And then the SPD is to develop a comprehensive plan for applying best practice approaches to addressing racial disparities in various contexts. And this is another area where the court required that the SPD develop this plan with input from the CPC and others identified in the order. Like that other item, this also has a deadline of mid-December. So to summarize those items where the CPC has a role, so there were the two that were expressly contemplated in the order, both relating to racial disparities and similar and related issues. On the left side here, I've identified those two areas where the CPC was specifically expected to participate and provide input into the SPD's process. But I'll also note, going back 10 years, a 2013 order where the court expressly stated that it valued the role carved out for the CPC in the consent decree and wants to hear its views on issues. The court noted that the CPC may file a memoranda commenting on any issue or motion raised by the parties in the court proceedings. So the CPC's role is not limited to just the two items listed on the left side. Just wanted, thought that would be worth pointing out. So that concludes my report. Happy to take questions, but again, if you need clarifying on anything, again, we should reserve anything about legal opinion for an executive session.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that presentation. I just want to first see if there are any commissioners that have any questions for our attorney and regarding the court's order and anything that he presented on. I'm not sure I see everyone, so if you do have a question, please go ahead and just start speaking up. I have one question. I know you touched on this a little bit, but can you speak a little bit more about what the judge said with respect to the police accountability ordinance and his expectations in the next contract spot?
Sure. I mean, I think you summarized it fairly well, and I just want to caution, I don't have the transcript, so I am doing this a little bit from my notes of the hearing. But as I noted in the presentation, the judge, while acknowledging that he was not empowered to intervene or interfere in collective bargaining, he warned that collective bargaining becomes an issue when it locks in procedures that undermine accountability or shelter officers from city ordinances. And he specifically called out the accountability work the city had passed. He also praised a recent DC law that took certain accountability related matters off the table for collective bargaining. The judge did not indicate what exactly he would do if he felt that collective bargaining was getting in the way of accountability reforms, but he certainly signaled his concerns if they do.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any other questions or thoughts or comments on the court's ruling on the consent decree? Well, if there are not any additional questions or comments, oh, I see Mr. Ward. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I would like, if at all possible, to obtain a copy of Mr. Shee's PowerPoint so that I can pass it on to the monitor and the monitor team. I also would like to request that we receive a copy of your letter once it is finalized and as soon as it goes out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. We will get both of those to you. The letter will be posted on the website when it's sent. My understanding is Mr. Shee's presentation is already on the website, but Mr. Ward, we will separately email you both of those.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Commissioner Walden.
Yeah, and I'd like to really thank you for making this presentation for us today, because I think that it's really important for the commissioners to understand the history and the work that got us to this place, and that it is ongoing, and that I just thought it was a great presentation, because at the end the judge did recognize the fact that accountability systems, the CPC and the ordinance is really important to constitutional policing and police reform in Seattle. So I really think that that's really important for the new commissioners to really know that that the judge did not, that the city of Seattle is not really completely from under the consent decree yet. So I think that was really good. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And then just one additional thing, and you may have covered it, but one last comment that I thought was noteworthy is that the city and DOJ asked the judge to approve essentially ending the consent decree entirely and adopting what they described as a transition agreement that covered the two additional areas of use of force and crowd control and police accountability. However, the judge, as I understand it, declined to do so, did not close the consent decree, but simply found the remaining provisions, except for those two in the consent decree, substantially satisfied or in compliance. So essentially, structurally, the consent decree is still there, but with these two areas of focus remaining, there is no transition agreement. The consent decree is not closed out as requested. So that's an important difference from what the city and DOJ were requesting, as I understand it. And I see Mr. Ward, you have your hand up again? Or is that from your prior comment?
Actually, I do not. That simply signifies that my still 18th century skills with this meeting continue. So please ignore it.
All right. Well, unless there are any additional questions or comments, certainly we have time for that if there are, but if not, then we are at the end of our agenda. I want to thank everyone for participating and sharing their views on the body worn video that we discussed and sharing what they're hearing from their communities. We will continue working on this. Expect more on this in future CPC meetings. But with that, today we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.